Yep. Okay, before we get started, I had a question here that I wanted to share with all of you because it's a great question. Hit it.
The question that I had was, over a number of years, I was under the impression that you did not amend the soil before you put a plant or a tree in it, because once the root system got through the amended portion and budded into the clay soil, it quit spreading out and starts winding around.
Right.
And now we're hearing something different, so that's the question I asked.
Okay, great question. What kind of soil is in the pot you get the trees in?
Potting soil.
It's nice, beautiful soil, huh? So if we follow that logic, I mean, yes, you should loosen the soil at the very least. Now, I treat native trees differently than I would a tree but I am impatient, so I want all my trees to thrive, not just survive. Surviving is for other people. I like my garden to thrive, all right? I have something to prove. So I amend my soils because all I'm doing with amending is going from a pot this size to whatever size hole I'm making, right? But the difference is my trees aren't going to have a problem getting into that clay soil because I'm irrigating it. Irrigation will make that clay soil soft enough, and it is nutrient rich, so those roots are going to want to penetrate it. But I have to be watering it. So when is that most likely going to be happening? When roots are growing and there's lots of water? Fall and winter, okay? The trees are going to grow out into that soil if it's nice and moist, it's soft. I say that even when you're planting, you don't water just where you put that pot. We are watering a couple inches out. And as that tree grows, we're going to water it out further and further. We don't just water to the drip line. We're watering a little bit beyond that because I want my roots to grow. So yes, great question, but it's failed logic, okay? Because then every other plant that we ever put in, because nobody grows them in clay or else we couldn't lift them. So, yes?
You were describing how you're clearing out an area to the canopy.
Mm-hmm.
So is that because the roots, because I always recall that roots were going down, but really they're going out?
They're going out. And I want to have that, I want to protect that area, but I also want to feed it. I want to water it. I want that just for the tree. I don't want it competing with other plants. I want to be able to water for that tree. And if I have whatever size that circle is, that I'm putting the feed and the water in, that tree's going to do well, right? And then it's not competing, especially with some of our natives, like, you know, he has a mesquite. If you water mesquite too much, it's either going to grow like crazy and get way too big and crazy, and you don't want that, or else it's going to rot. Some trees just don't like it, but don't be planting mesquites. I'm not meaning that. But I will say, I told him they make delicious honey. Ooh, if you ever get a chance to buy some mesquite honey, it's crystallized, so it's solid, but it's like water white. You can see right through it when you harvest it, but then it's solid. It gets really solid. Delicious. Okay?
So you're saying that when you amend that, not just put back the soil that was there, it's not going to cause a little bit of a delay or an issue with it bumping up against the clay. Obviously, we all have planted some things wrong over our lifetime, and we know that plants find a way of surviving in spite of us.
Yeah.
But you're saying it's not going to cause a problem with adding the extra soil, but it's also not going to cause a problem if you just plant it back in the soil it was in.
I would loosen
You're
it.
talking about the thriving.
Yes.
You
And
want to give it a little extra boost.
Exactly.
And show off a little bit.
well,
more.
but I have a root system this big then, right? So that big of a root system that is thick with roots and I'm feeding it and everything is going to be able to survive a lot better than if I planted just this big and say, good luck, fella.
Well, I'm
right?
not talking about the size of the hole, I'm talking about adding the compost.
Yes,
we were
but
talking about.
that's what I'm saying. If my hole is this big and I've added compost,
Right.
and it's going to grow roots into that quick, right? And it's going to have,
Versus the clay soil that you're putting back.
Yeah, so-
In a large.
so it's kind of a delay. At least if you're putting the same soil back,
Yes.
you've loosened it.
Right.
So you don't really need to take it out. If your intention is just to put that clay soil back in, all you need to do is loosen it.
Okay.
You don't need to remove it. But I do use the clay soil because it makes really nice berms. Yeah, so I use it, I put it around, I make my berm, and boy, if you get that wet, you can almost cement it, and yeah, you can do a really good job with it. So that's where and that's to keep my husband and his mower out of it, so he knows exactly where to go. But yeah, and then all weeds and everything are removed inside. I mulch, that's where I fertilize, that's where I water, everything goes inside that berm.
I think we just want to make sure that we are giving a consistent message.
Yes.
Across as master gardeners.
Well,
that
even-
we are, because we've been taught that you're just putting the soil that was there back in it. You're still doing twice as wide as the pot size or
Yeah.
whatever width and same depth, but.
So you don't have
We
to.
don't want to give mixed messages.
Yeah,
that
you
we
don't
weren't
have to.
educated
So
to.
yeah, so make sure you educate them if you really want this tree to grow and for you to enjoy it in your lifetime and the benefits, then you can amend it and that will help it grow faster.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I do. So they can mix it 50-50. We used to do that for a while. Just loosen it, but they have to, at minimum, they have to at least loosen it wider than the pot. Because I've been on landscape crews where they took an auger, drilled the holes. They had a 1 gallon auger, a 5 gallon auger, 15, and then you get those slick sides.
Yep.
That's where you're going to have the roots
Stops.
hitting that, because it is hard.
Right.
And it will just spin around. And guess what? They weren't watering beyond that either to soften that soil. They were watering maybe the lawn on top of it, so you're getting a few inches where it's soft, but not where your roots want to grow out. So yes, you will have that problem if you auger and you have those slick sides on clay. Yeah, it's not good at all. So definitely soften the sides.
How deep do you make that berm that goes around?
Well, I'm going to mulch at least 4 inches, so it's at least that. Yeah, and remember, my drip irrigation goes under, and then I put the mulch on top. I've already added the fertilizer in there when I plant. All right? We good? Are you ready to dive into pruning?
You bet.
Okay, are you guys afraid of pruning?
No.
Okay, good. Okay, pruning is really simple, and you can teach people how to do this so they're not afraid of it either. But trees are different than shrubs. All right, the general rule of thumb with shrubs, you prune after they flower. Okay? You can prune them after they flower. Even better rule of thumb, you don't prune them. You plant something you're gonna let it grow to the size it wants to grow, and you leave it alone. All of them, oh, don't do that on me. All of them have a size that they want to be. And so we do some planting. But sometimes we inherit issues where they've planted a Texas sage that wants to be 6 or 8 feet tall and wide, and it's by our sidewalk. Okay, that's a problem. So if you're going to have to put it into a little, circle every single year, I would dig it up and move it. But that's up to you. Okay, so John Muir, he thought that people were basically good, and so he said, the wrongs done to tree, wrongs of every sort, are done in the darkness of ignorance and unbelief. For when the light comes, the heart of the people is always right. So he really believes that people want to do what's right, so we just have to educate them, and that's why we're here. Okay, so pruning is just removing parts, right? And it can be for a number of different reasons. There are good reasons to prune, but if we do some of that work ahead of time, we'll have to prune even less. And so we just have to know how the tree is going to react, because they are very easy to, we know what they do. So we just have to prune so that we know what their reaction is going to be, and then we're in exactly what we wanted in the area we want to be. Okay, here's some number of things that suckers. When do we prune suckers? All the time. As soon as we see them, take those off. They're just wasting energy, okay? Suckers, we don't want suckers. It's even better if you don't have a tree that suckers a lot, because they're a pain in the neck and they're just irritating, okay? So prune off suckers anytime. That's a waste of energy. How about water sprouts? Have you guys ever seen the water sprouts? Grows straight up, and boy, does it take a lot of energy, and they will get really big. Prune them off anytime you see them. Especially fruit trees, these will never fruit for you. You have to have horizontal branches to fruit. Okay, so that's another waste of energy. Get rid of them. And oftentimes, if you have grafted trees, if it's coming off down there, guess what? That's your root stock. You don't want that. It'll take over the top. We don't want it. Okay, I didn't want to get into this whole stubs. Do we leave stubs? No. Okay, that is where you're going to get the start of a column of decay. If you leave a stub, and it can be 1 inch, it can be 5, it doesn't matter. You're leaving a stub. The tree cannot do that compartmentalization that closes the wound and stops that decay, or at least slows it. All right, it's not like us where if we get a wound, it actually heals and you can't even tell that it was there. Trees, you'll always be able to tell. When you're cutting into wood, when you go and get lumber, you can always tell where the branches came out, right? Those are the knots. But if you leave a stub, this branch, wherever it first connected to this one that it came out of, that column of decay, it's going to die right down to that spot. And if left open and water enters, insects enters, disease or fungus enters where that is all dry and it's not closed off, that column of decay is going to keep spreading wide and down. Which in nature, that's fine. That's how we get the holes where the birds can live, or the raccoons, or the squirrels. That's okay. That's totally fine out in nature. But we generally don't want that in our yard. All right? So we need to make sure we don't leave stubs. We want to cut them at the bark, just outside the bark ridge or the branch collar. Okay? The bark ridge is where bark is pushed up, because remember, your branches grow out each year. So that bark is pushing against each other each year as it grows, and it's really pretty easy to see after a few years. The branch collar is where there's kind of a swelling that narrows down to the size of the branch that comes out, and so you want to leave that branch collar intact. That is the magical place on the trees where the healing can happen. All right, it heals behind so that it doesn't go any further into the tree. It heals below, it shuts it off, it compartmentalizes below and above, and then you start getting the wound closure on either side. That is the only place that can happen on the tree, is at the branch collar. So if you cut that off because you want to be right in line with your trunk, you've just left a great big old gap there that the tree has no way of healing. Okay, so you got to be really smart to leave just a little bit, because that the wood will shrink a little bit as it dries out. But if it's a nice, healthy growing tree, it's going to close that wound pretty fast. Okay, smaller ones, they'll be gone in a year. And you'll see that. There's round growth. And you can recognize that was a good cut. The tree is growing nicely, and it gets rid of it. Okay, so is it okay to prune off low-hanging branches? Yes, we want to be able to walk under our trees. So as soon as they get enough canopy, other branches that are producing energy, we can prune off the low ones. When we first plant it, we want to leave these low ones because they help develop the taper of the trunk. Okay, they're providing energy, the tree can sometimes even grow those off themselves. Trees, when those lower branches or any interior branches quit producing enough energy to supply their leaves as well as give some back to the tree, then that branch collar starts pinching them off. And they'll just naturally kill that branch and let it die off. You'll see that out in the woods, out in forest. So if they're not getting enough sunlight that those leaves can support themselves and give something back to the tree, they will pinch them off and grow beyond. All right? So low-hanging branches are okay. How about, well, we'll get into that in a minute. Thinning is okay too. We want light and air to be able to penetrate the canopy. Some people go overboard with the thinning, and it takes out too much. So we'll get into some rules about that. But how about broken branches? Always easy. I wanted to point out something about that. It broke out here, but they cut it back here. They went back to the branch collar, because if you left it out here, it would be a stub. And then that would start that column of decay that would go all the way down. All right? Okay, so what we're hoping for is evenly spaced branches all the way up, and not just on either side of the tree, but all the way around. Remember, they're three-dimensional. So we're hoping to get branches that are all the way around. Now, they've done a few things. I always do the 3 Ds first. Dead, damaged, diseased. You can get those out first. All right? If they're already dead, it's not going to hurt anything to remove them. Remove them whenever it happens. If they're damaged, we have a wind come through, some sort of storm. Getting a clean cut is better than having a rip or a break, and then you have some branch hanging up in the canopy. You want to get those off. Make a clean cut, let the tree heal. So dead, damaged, diseased is usually off-colored. So we want to get that off. Some other things, now if we have mistletoe, you don't cut it off right where it's at. Remember that the mistletoe actually grows roots down that branch for at least a foot. It is a true parasite, so it's taking all of its nutrition from that tree, so it has a pretty good root system inside that branch. So you have to go at least a foot beyond to remove mistletoe. If you don't remove mistletoe, then you're sharing it with all your neighbors. Okay? They flower, the birds eat those little berries, and then they go poop them somewhere else, and it spreads. Okay, so definitely want to get mistletoe out. Mistletoe can actually kill a tree because it can grow so much that it's taking the nutrients from the tree and it takes over. Okay, so dead, damaged, disease, those are the first ones. Those are the easy ones. Then you go to the 3 Cs, and they include things like crossing, competing, like these that are crossing each other. They're always going to be rubbing. Get one of them out. Pick whichever one is the best, is doing what you want it to be doing, and you remove the other one. All right? Competing is when you have a couple of them coming out at the same spot. You might even have 3. Okay, if you have a bunch of them coming out at the same spot, pick the one you want to keep, get rid of the rest. So, and then crossing can also be if the general shape of your tree is out. If you have one that's going doing, growing back into the center or growing over into another branch's space, get rid of it. Okay? We want everything nicely spaced out. Don't touch me, right? So don't let them touch each other. Keep them nicely spaced. So, you know, there's a number of things in here that could be removed that are just, they're growing into the other branch's space, and some are just growing. You know, you don't want competing branches up here either. You have your main trunk. Now, not all trees have this shape, but when you have a tree that has that growth where there's one main trunk, you want to make sure that these side branches don't outcompete that top one. Now, remember, we have that auxin, that hormone that is produced at the tips of the branches. And they keep the other branches, by releasing that hormone all the time, they keep the other branches from growing too much. So if you remove that, if I nip that, everybody can grow like wild, okay? And that will happen. So we don't come along and just nip a branch out here, because all the other side branches then are going to grow like crazy, uncontrolled, and you'll have a mess. So you need to, that oxen will control the growth of the other branches. But occasionally you'll get one where you'll have 2 leaders. And you'll say, oh, I can't cut that one out. Well, at least subject it then. You can cut it back and make it so it's not competing quite as well with your main leader. Or else you'll have 2 competing ones all the time, and they'll be co-dominant stems. And when one of them fails, it's going to be a big failure. You'll get a big wound, and then your tree won't have any branches there. It will be ugly. So it's much better to do it when they're young. But if you start when they're really small trees and get rid of any of that, you usually don't have that later on, unless you have some sort of storm damage that takes out your leader. I've had that with lightning strikes, or sometimes wind will just break off that tip. Then you can prune it down to the next branch that could be the leader. And I've actually left some of the dead branch, and then I've taped it, tied it, something to make that next branch that I want to be the new leader. I pulled it up, and then it takes over, and it'll be the new leader. And then I can come back the following year and prune out that stub. Okay, so if you do have a leader broken out of your tree, all is not lost. You can train that next branch, whatever lower branch, you train that into place, pull it up somehow, and it'll take over as being that new leader. And within a couple of years, you won't even see the jog anymore. It'll straighten itself out. Okay, so we want them evenly spaced all the way around, and then we remove any of the competing, rubbing, any of that.
What was your other C? You said crossing, competing?
Competing.
Said you had 3 of them?
It'll come. It's on here somewhere. Okay, time for pruning. It's almost time. It's almost time. Okay, so wintertime, of course, is the best time to prune our trees. One, very few insects are out and about. Yes, we have some funguses that could be out and about because there's so much moisture, but if it's nice and cold, they're not going to be active. They need warmth and moisture. So you don't want to do it after you have leaves on. That means the tree just put all that energy into new leaves, and then you whacked them off, okay? So during the winter time, when all the leaves are off, they've stored all that energy, that's the best time to prune. And you can see the branches. It's so much easier to see the structure of the tree if you don't have a bunch of leaves in your face. So definitely want to do it, you know, after the leaves have dropped. So I know it's cold and it's windy, but wait for a nice day and go out there and do your pruning. And, you know, so do it just like that. You're going to walk around the tree, do a whole circle, and then you're going to start removing your Ds, dead, damaged, disease. You get those out. Any suckers, any sprouts, get those out. Maybe you're done. That might be all you have to do is to remove those. But then you can do any of those crossing or competing, any of those, or maybe it's crowded, crossing, competing. It's another C. Crowded's good. That's what it was. You'll see it later. So yeah, so if you're doing it after the leaves have already come out, or when the buds are swelling, they're already starting to make in those. So I will still do it if I have bud swell and I just hadn't gotten out there. You can still do it then because it hasn't put too much energy into it, but it's better to do it when they're fully dormant so you don't waste any energy of the tree. So if you do period 4, so right before leaf drop, you're going to have a lot more of the water sprouting, fungal spores. You know, it's taking away the energy for the leaf abscission. So, but deadwood anytime. Now, it's not totally bad to leave deadwood in trees. It's habitat, okay? But we can't leave it where it's going to fall and hurt somebody.
Live oaks.
They always have some deadwood in them.
I know, but they stay with the leaf all winter until spring.
Wintertime is still best with them.
Okay.
Yeah, because we have the less chance of fungal, insect, anything like that. Yeah, you have to deal with the leaves all the time. Now, and that's another thing. With some of these trees, they always have some deadwood in them. Don't drive yourself crazy trying to get every dead twig out. That's just natural for that species of tree. Okay? Leave it alone, live with it. But they will not, most of them are small enough that they're just going to fall off. You get a wind, oh, there's some branches that fall off. That's okay. What you don't want is a 5-inch branch to fall off in a wind and knock you in the head when you're out in your yard, okay? Or knock a neighbor in the head. That's even worse. But yeah, you don't want that. Okay? Now on spring flowering trees, you need to prune after the flowering. Always. That's kind of like the shrubs. Prune after they flower. And some things, yes, you're pruning. If you're pruning your fruit trees, you need to be really good at knowing your fruiting spurs if there are species that has fruiting spurs. Because yes, you will remove some of the fruiting spurs if you're not careful. And they fruit every year on the same fruiting spurs. So you want to keep those. But you also want to teach people who are picking the fruit to be careful of the fruiting spurs, because if they're just ripping the fruit off, they're probably breaking your fruiting spurs off. Okay, so definitely want to protect our fruiting spurs. But spring flowering, do it after spring flowers, or else you've just pruned off your flowering. Okay, so we never want to remove more than 25% of the crown, because then all of a sudden it's just going to go, oh my gosh, I need to reproduce all these leaves, and it'll just explode with growth, and it'll be more of an uncontrolled response. So we want to make sure we're only doing about 25% of the live crown. Okay, that's not including those suckers on the ground. They don't count towards it. And those water sprouts, get them out of there. Dead stuff, that's not live. Okay, so when we're pruning, so does that mean that maybe if you've had a tree that needs attention, but it hasn't received it for several years, that you're not going to be able to do it all in the first year? Yes. And a good arborist will tell you that. I'm going to have to come back for a couple years, and I'm going to do a certain amount this year, and maybe they get out the worst stuff, and then next year they get out the rest. Then you're going to have a controlled response. Yes?
What would you do, we had this question at the help desk, about a tree that's been over pruned for way too long to look ornamental, and they want, now it's grown 8 feet tall, and they want it to be shorter, but there's just this little area at the top that they've allowed to grow. What do you tell someone?
No, once they've started shaping it into little lollipops, they're stuck with the lollipop. It's never going to get its natural shape again once they've done that to it. Or you'd have to, I mean, they would have to have them out there and pruning it really selectively over several years to get it back to its natural shape. I hate lollipops.
So leave it alone, but
It's going to,
much done the
it's,
damage that.
yeah. But so they either have to love lollipops and keep paying for that. But really, it's really hard to get them to go back into their natural shape. Like after, especially if they're supposed to have a main leader and that's been chunked off, and then you have all this other weird growth, it's going to be really hard to prune that back in. And so, yes, if you're a master gardener, you want to tackle that, you can, devote yourself for the next few years to try to get back into, but it will take a lot of time, a lot of patience, and a lot of know-how to make, because you'll have to be able to vision what that tree structure is supposed to look like and remove the stuff that's not, and 25% at a time.
And you can't get rid of 8 feet tall, all the leaves are at the top.
Yeah, so it's already been damaged. Let's see. Okay, so in trees, remember we have a cambium layer, which is where the growth happens every year. That's how we get rings. There's a cambium layer, and it puts on xylem on the inside, phloem on the outside. The phloem is where the juices are flowing, down, and that's like a bunch of straws. So if anybody at any time damages that trunk to the point that it kills the cambium in an area, the tree has no way of fixing that, really healing that. So if they bump into it or they girdle it or something like that on, it's not going to be able to fix itself. Doesn't mean that the rest of the tree can't go on and live without that little portion of the cambium, but we really do need to protect our trunks, especially ones with very thin bark. That's what the bark is for, is to protect that cambium layer. But some trees have very thin bark, at least when they're young, and then others, can develop it as they get older. But we really need to protect that cambium layer, because once it's damaged, just like just cutting straws, now you got air in there and they're done. So we do need to protect that layer. And that's a really cool thing about trees too, is that you can see, when you cut through one, you can see the years where there was lots of nutrient, lots of water, good growing condition, because they have a wide ring of growth. And then the years that they were stressed out, they'll have really narrow rings of growth. So you can see what happened. There's even labs. The University of Arizona has a really cool lab, and they go into that. They have a number of tree rings there where you can see when the fire came through, you can see when this happened. I mean, they can go back through time and tell you what happened historically because of the tree rings. Okay, so there are some, they're latent buds or adventitious buds that are there in the tree, and they don't grow because they are just the tree's insurance policy if you remove too much of the crown. Like if a storm came through and a lot of the tree was gone, or if it was pruned really bad and too much of the tree's energy producers got taken away, it has all these sleeping buds that are just there as insurance, that they all of a sudden will then grow. They'll get the signal to grow, and you'll get sprouts on the sides. I mean, you'll get sprouts everywhere, just growing like crazy, where they wouldn't normally have grown if, that devastating whatever happened, with that tree, the leaf removal happened. So that's when you get the uncontrolled growth, and you'll have, they were dormant or adventitious. They can be on the trunks or the branches, and you've probably seen that. Have any of you seen that, where you'll just get all this wild growth? Yeah, and sometimes that's because a tree is on its last leg, and it's just trying to survive. So it'll put out all this growth, trying to survive. And so it's just, growing leaves everywhere. And it's just its last dying breath trying to.
Recommend pruning in that case when it's like
Oh,
a
no,
water sprout
no.
or a sucker, but it's like all it's got left. So
Yeah, so you would have to be really, I would want to find the reason why it is that stressed. And it might be that a bunch of its roots were taken away too, or it could be a number of things. But you would want to find out what that was and fix that first, and then see if you can save the tree. But that again is a case where you're going to have to do slowly removal of some of those branches that you didn't want over time, because it'll just be this wild, uncontrolled growth.
I have a pomegranate tree that I have over-pruned it, trying to make it look like a tree, and it's this. So.
Well, and they want to be shrubs.
Bush, it's just a big bush now, and
Yeah.
so I can't even touch it anymore.
Pomegranates want to be bushes.
So
They just
leave it
do.
alone.
Yeah.
For them to 5 to 7 stalks is typically what they run.
Yeah, and then try to get them so that they're more trunk-like instead of just stem-like, because they want to splay down too. They get so weighed with fruit that they'll just be all over. And over time, it'll be that way. It'll be fine. So just light pruning over time. Okay. Okay, so we have both X-current and D-current trees. You can probably think of trees in both of these categories. So this just means that it has that main leader, and this means that it comes to a certain level, and it still might kind of have a leader, but it tends to develop branches out from that. So it's different pruning for both of these, but remember, we can do the same thing where we want to get out the 3Ds and then the 3Cs, removing water sprouts and suckers. And that's the same on either one. But this one, you're not going to be able to get it perfect that it never has any crossing or branches that are trying to be in the same space. Once it gets above where you can reach with your little pole saw, it's always going to have some of that. But they grow branches and leaves where there's sunlight. And that's what the tree is trying to do, is take advantage of as much sunlight as possible. Now these trees, well, those too, but these trees will naturally tend to drop their lower branches as it gets more canopy up here. Why? Because they're not getting sunlight, right? So then it will naturally do that. And that's totally natural. And with pine trees, they too tend to, and they're on different amount of years that they drop their needles, but it's totally normal for pine trees to drop the needles on the inside of the branches. Again, why? Because they're not getting sunlight. They're the older needles. They might have been on there for 3 years, and for them to shed is totally normal. So you're going to have more growth outside, and the whole inside of that might be just bare. That's normal for pines. That's normal for some of our evergreens. Some of the junipers and stuff, they have so much canopy on the outside that it'll be naked on the inside. Arborvitaes, that kind of thing. Really important that you don't prune into that then, huh? Because it'll be ugly. And a lot of times those don't come back from that. So if you, all of a sudden, instead of trimming it all the time so it stays off your house or something, you're going, oh, okay, I'm going to go in. You might get into deadwood and it's not going to sprout new growth. So hedges, really important that you don't do that, because you'll just have these sticks sitting there poking you after that. So don't do it. That's why I say just don't put things where you're going to have to prune them. Let them get to their size. Okay, so we want 2/3 of the tree, which this picture is off of that, but 2/3 of the tree is supposed to be live crown, which means you can come up 1/3 of the height. Say there's a tree that's 30 feet tall. 10 feet of that can be bare trunk, but the rest of it should have live crown. How many of you seen trees that they've pruned and pruned and pruned and pruned and pruned, and so they only have live leaves out on the very tips of the branches? Yeah, that's a no-no. That's not healthy. We want 2/3 of that tree to have live crown. That's when the tree's going to have enough energy to be able to, it's going to be able to produce enough energy for keeping that tree healthy. And why is energy production so important, other than just creating leaves? It's to keep the tree healthy. We were talking earlier about the attacks from insects and stuff and disease pathogens. And if the tree is healthy, it can fight off those attacks. Or, maybe it'll lose a few leaves, but that's not going to affect the overall health of the tree if it's healthy. But if you've over pruned it, or you're underwatering it, or it doesn't have the nutrition it needs, it's not going to be able to fight off those attacks. So take, for instance, like pine trees. When in nature, when they get eaten on by something, a little boring insect comes in and eats, when it hits that cambium layer, what do pine trees do? Bloop, they send a whole bunch of sap there, right? It might come goozing out, but that's their response. They're going to, ooh, we'll show you chewing on me, right? They send that nasty, how many of you ever gotten that on you? Sticky, it doesn't taste good, yeah. That's what it does to the bugs. They actually stop the feeding by sending a bunch of that sap. What happens if that tree is in a drought situation? So it doesn't have any extra energy and or water to be able to produce that sap to continue fighting off the beetles. The beetles are going to win. So we'll go in and say, oh, yeah, beetle feeding. That's what killed this tree. Well, not really. It was the drought situation that weakened the tree, and the trees actually put out a pheromone that tells the beetles that they're stressed. And the beetles smell it, and they come and feed. Okay, so we were actually fighting off the attacks of beetles like that, because we know when the beetles are flying and when they're looking for a place to eat. So we would put pheromone packs out there that tricked the beetles into thinking, oh, there's way too many beetles already there. We'll just keep flying. Okay, so we had to put them out every 50 feet and 6 feet up, and and they lasted for a couple of years. But they were just little pheromone packs. You stapled them to the tree, and we were able to maintain this remnant forest area by doing that. It's a very simple thing. Yeah, they stunk a little bit when you're putting them out, but you couldn't notice in the forest just walking through. But we were able to do that, tricking them into thinking, oh yeah, we don't want to go there by the pheromone. So yeah, the stress caused the decline because it invited the beetles in, or else the tree would have been able to fight it off all by itself. Okay, so we are seeing more and more of that where we have drought conditions where there used to be plenty of rain, and you'll see that more and more. Okay, so we already kind of did this. You can just see what the math is. Basically, it's 2/3. You want live crown ratio, and only 1/3 is going to be the bare trunk. Oh, so this is a great illustration of what a branch collar and why they're so strong. So each year, you have the trunk is growing around that branch, and then the branch is also growing, and these are getting interwoven. Each year of growth, and that's super strong. And this doesn't show you where the branch collar is out here, but that's why you don't want to try to shave it back here. You want to do out where there's that branch collar, and it can heal it and keep all these others. But that's basically a knot in wood, if you were ever wondering. Ever try to put a nail or a screw through a knot? It's all this really tight wood. It's really hard to get through. Super hard, super strong. We want to protect those. But V-shaped, so tight V-shaped branches are not as strong as the wider branches, more U-shaped. Okay, so that brings us to how many have seen the Bradford pears? They were really overplanted. We really liked those in the 70s. So everybody planted them. They were a beautiful show. But what did they have? V-shaped branches, really tight angles on those. So when they fail big, right? They'll rip off this whole branch and you'll have this big old wound. And they tend to get brittled. They're kind of short-lived. So more and more people aren't planting those at all, and they know they're short-lived, but watch out because I've seen some here that were bigger than I knew a Bradford pear could even grow. They were really, really big. So yeah, the V-shaped branching, they're going to fail, and they're going to fail big. Okay, great picture. Okay, this is your branch, just cut off there. But this would be your branch collar. See how there's swelling? So you could remove it anywhere out here. Now don't worry about making a straight up and down cut. You want to cut with the same angle as your branch collar. All right, leave a little bit so that and it might only be 1/4 of an inch. The most important thing is that you don't damage when you're cutting it off, which can be tricky sometimes depending on the tool that you're using. So, the first tool you need is hand pruners, nice sharp ones, okay? Those can do the little things. Those can do your water sprouts, they can do your suckers, prune those off. And hello, I just had to fix this at one of our places, crepe myrtles, okay? You know that they sucker bad. Well, people had left them this tall. So they pruned them off, but they left this much. So that got big every year, and it sent out more and more. And pretty soon I had like this bush down there that you had to fight through trying to get all those off. Prune them off as low as you can get, to the soil if possible. Prune them way down, and they tend not to come back as badly. But yeah, you want to make sure that you prune that off. Leave a little bit of space for it to dry out, and it'll grow right around it, and you'll be happy with the healing. So pruning shears, that's number one. And then I have a saw that cuts both ways. You can get them so they fold, that blade folds right into the handle, or you can get a solid one, but they're pretty aggressive. I've had that same saw for probably 15 years now, and it's still sharp. So that one I don't have to sharpen. My pruning shears, I have to sharpen. And if you get loppers, you need to sharpen those too. And you can get some that have extendable arms on the loppers, so you have more, strength. Yeah, that leverage really helps on some of them. But if you're worried about leverage, you're probably cutting too big a branch, right? And we're in there. And of course, they work better on green wood versus dead wood. Dead wood's harder to cut through. You're going to need a saw. Use a saw. They have some really nice little battery-powered tiny chainsaws now.
Yeah, those are really nice.
They're really nice. Yes. So those are really nice. What's that?
Won't give that to my wife.
I think she needs one. Yep. But they also, and then the other tool, the only other tool I need for my pruning is one on a pole, okay? So not a chainsaw on a pole. I have used those, but that's when I was doing it professionally. I won't use that as a homeowner. I don't need it. But I just have that same really sharp blade on the end. And that one even you can fold down or you can remove it. But it also has a little nipper. And I can do all my pruning with that. Anything beyond that, leave it to the professionals, okay? Call someone. Do not be climbing up in a tree. I don't want to see you up in a tree, okay? Yeah, call them and do it. And it's okay too, if you want to be out there, I know it drives them nuts, but you're paying them, so you can say, I even get, laser pointer for that. I want it cut right there. No, not that one. Yeah, right there. No, that's too much of a stub. Yeah, and you tell them, and you just have them cut exactly where you want them to cut. Because just because they say that they know what they're doing does not mean it's true. Okay, so this one shows pretty good. Do you see that swelling? And then here where it narrows down, that's your branch collar. Okay, if we were to remove back here, much bigger wound, and it wouldn't heal. You would get a big old dead cavity in there. So we don't want that. Okay, these are really good. They kind of show you what happens. So if you leave it clear out here, you've got the stump. That's not good. You're going to get rot that goes down way inside. But if you get just outside that collar and you cut that way, it's going to heal really well. Same with this one. If you leave that, you're going to get the dead that comes all the way down to the middle of the tree, and it'll continue going all the way down. Okay, Alex Shigo was fabulous. He killed more trees than anybody I know. And he cut them all up and took pictures of them and made diagrams. So he really knows about pruning and keeping trees alive.
Some of your illustrations are so helpful for educating. Is it possible that you could send your presentations to Erin for us?
I can PDF them. Because right now they're kind of big. But yes, I can do that.
Thank you.
Question.
Yes.
Pruning spray, when you were doing this? Like
Pruning spray?
Yeah, that stuff, the spray, whatever.
Okay.
Good,
The-
bad, indifferent.
It's great for the people who are selling it, not necessary. So they did test on that if painting, because we used to do that. Remember, we're going to paint it. It does no good. It does nothing for the tree. But I will take that back on oak wilt. So on oak wilt, we do put a layer of something on there to keep fungus spores from hitting on that cut. Okay, so that would be the only case on the oaks that have oak wilt you're pruning off. But remember, with oak wilt, there's no cure. We can delay the death of the tree, but that's about it.
So, I've been told that oak wilt spores are only active between January and June. Is that correct? Do you agree with that?
They tend to, that's when they're telling us, and it's even later than that. It's more like April through June we're not supposed to be pruning because that's when they're mostly active. And so again, you want to do your pruning dead of winter. January is still cold for them to be active, and even February-ish.
So if you had to prune an oak tree during that danger time because maybe a branch broke off in the storm or something, would you then paint that?
That's when you would paint it, yes. So that's why we would prune, exactly right. If we have damage from winds or whatever and you have a hanger, you've got to cut it off, you cut it off and then you paint it. Okay, that's the only reason. Now, if you see oak wilt happening and, you know, if there's any, it transfers by root. Okay, and we just talked about how trees have really wide roots. They can go up 5 to 7 times past the canopy. So really, you know, limiting that is hard. And they've seen that I thought, well, most of their roots are in the top 18 inches, so if we put a barrier down 2 feet, that should do it. And they're going, no, we've had to go as deep as 4 feet. So you're not going to be able to prevent it from spreading. You can put in those root barriers to try to keep, if you have a tree that's dying from oak wilt over there and you don't want it to get to your tree, trench, put in the barrier, but we're losing a lot of trees because of it. So it really depends on how much money you want to spend on saving that tree.
Well, and on the oak wilt post a storm, because we had that one in May 2 years ago, everybody, was it 2 years? Who knows?
Yes.
But if you do the paint, you have to do it within like the first 24 hours or something, because it's about
Oh, yeah.
the pheromone, right? Because that's going to bring the beetles. And the
Well, it's also
fungus and the-
blocking that wound so that they can't get in there because it's that fungus, that active fungal spore.
So if you can't get it done within a day or two, is
No,
it still?
it's cut paint, yeah. And also you want to make sure, what do you do with your cutting tools after that?
You clean them.
Yeah, you have to clean them. Remember all those wipes and all that stuff we have left over from COVID? Great use for it, okay? Use it on your tools, but then you have to dry that off, and you might have to oil them too because metal doesn't like all that alcohol on it, okay? Oh, and one use for paints on trees would be if you're protecting thin bark. Okay, so they do have one, citrus trees is the one I'm thinking of, so I know down south, they will sometimes paint, you have to paint that south and west side to keep the sun. It'd be better if you didn't prune so high so that, you know, the canopy is protecting the trunk, but a lot of them, you know, prune the canopy way up high so the sun can hit the trunk and it will scald it and burn it. There's no coming back from that. So sometimes they paint the trunks to protect them. And they have one that's like a tan color, so you can barely tell that they've been painted. But some people do it with that white. If you do it with the white, you got to measure them. Draw a line with the string or something and make sure they're all perfect, or else everybody else will be able to tell. Okay, this again is showing that if you leave a stump, how that column of decay starts, and it goes way down to where that bud first came out from the other branch. So where is our branch collar on here? It's back in here. There's your one. And then your bark ridge is even further back. The branch protection zone, of course, is where the tree is reacting, trying to prevent. You do have a dormant bud back here that now that it doesn't have that auxin coming from this branch preventing it, you can get those sprouts. So I did have a neighbor that they had some branches that were hanging over there too low over the driveway. So what did they do? They cut them off at the edge of the driveway. Stump, 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 stump. And I went, ah. And oh, that's a great picture because I know exactly what's going to happen. Took a picture, waited a few months, exactly what I knew was going to happen. The stumps died, but you get all this wild growth. So instead of having one branch, they had 6. You know, it was just a mess. And so then they had to come back and do even more pruning. So you can look at those and say, yep, that one should have been removed all the way back there. And then, you know, but yeah, they actually made it so much worse because then you had all these dormant buds that suddenly went nuts because of that tree or that branch being removed. Okay, flush cuts, bad. All right, that was way bigger of a wound than it needed to be because they wanted to go straight up and down. That is not going to heal. That is going to decay, dry out, and cause a huge area of decay in that tree because they totally removed the whole branch collar. All right, so then, you know, you're going to get your rot coming down. It's going to create a great big, although, you know, maybe a raccoon family will move in. So you got that. Okay, so this shows you the 4 walls encoded. So number 1, it's going to resist that vertical spread. And remember, it's saying resisting. So it's trying, but it's not totally perfect and totally working. Then you have the one in the back so that it doesn't go inward as much. Number 3 is going to try to prevent the circumference from spreading. And then number 4 is just trying to, and this is out where it, you know, it's just going to keep rotting other. So it's trying to protect the rest of around the wound from rotting. And it closes that off, so you might get some decay, but then you're going to get this reactionary wood. See, you can even see the curl starting here because it's very curled wood growth that happens. And we can go out and look. Where were the trees that you showed me? They're right out there? Okay, so do you guys want to walk around a bit? Is it, because I'd like to show you some of these things on trees. Okay, let's take a walk outside for a few minutes.
Quick question, maybe I should ask here in the group if it's valuable. You mentioned a lot of energy. Where is the energy stored in trees?
In the roots.
In the roots.
But it can be, it can also be in the branches somewhat, but
Okay.
it usually is in the roots. That's where most of it is.
As like
Yeah.
carbohydrates or something like
Yes, yes. So some of it, it can be even in the stem. The trunk is going to store some, but a lot of it is down in the roots. Yeah.
I got a quick question for you. I planted a Shangtung maple last October.
Mm-hmm.
It was, I don't know, yay tall.
Uh-huh.
And it looks extremely healthy, but it's growing vertically, not out. It's
Oh.
it's 8 foot tall now. It's grown 4 feet in a year, but it's not getting wider. It's just, is that
Yeah.
normal for that tree? Or?
Well, yeah, you can always, if you carefully nip some of those, it would tend to make it grow out more, which is one of the things we can do that are very, trees are just so easy to predict what they're going to do. Okay, I think we'll walk over here, a bunch of trees